Hello. Welcome to the Cross Labs podcast On My Mind, where every week Cross Labs members and friends share a little bit about, well, what's on their minds. We're scientists and researchers who think deeply about what intelligence, life, technology are, but also what they could be. And with today's extremely fast rate of algorithm development, we certainly do have a lot on our minds. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Well, today's topic was supposed to be what's on Olaf's mind, but then Olaf can't make it today. So on Olaf's mind, in the mid to long-term future, what is the ultimate best interface to communicate between two humans to solve problems? For example, should we use good old speech, as we have been doing for millennia? Or could we use something like brain chips to communicate, like maybe a neural link or something? Or are there other options? Maybe there's some technology that we haven't yet considered yet.
Well, I guess I can talk about the stuff I sent you in the private chat, Alisa. So I was writing an introduction for a research I want to do. And normally I suck at writing. So I basically use speech to text from Google Docs. And then I feed that stuff to ChatGPT and I say hey, rephrase this in an academic tone. And it did a very believable output that the problem is I still had to fix a bunch of stuff that it didn't get correctly, especially concepts and stuff. But I can imagine in the future, me saying an idea to an LLM that will get what I mean, then someone else gives their idea to this other LLM, and then they can talk about it. And then just give us the result. What you were thinking is A, B, and the output C is impossible, but D can be something. And I can totally see that as a thing in the future.
Yeah, totally. Sort of like a model that puts a context around your ideas and contextualizes it in terms of different things like feasibility, like you said, but there could be things about legality as well. You could also have one that's about, ethics, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I think the more valuable thing than trying to actually interpret or think about the thing is just to change the voice to a voice that you are better dealing with. Some people, in my case, I can't read math papers because it's not a good way for me to understand things, to have it be very formal, putting things in the form of lemmas and properties and definitions. But on the other hand, when I write things, Martin can't read them very well because he needs that stuff. And that stuff is actually the best way for him to understand the idea. So rather than trying to, because the thing is is something legal is a point of expertise that has a very high cost of failure, right? That's the kind of stuff that AI is bad at, because you can't really control for it. Whereas on the other hand, changing the tone of something or changing the phrasing, rephrasing, but keeping the content from the source, because at the end of the day, you're going to be evaluating whether or not it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. That's a lot safer. If it's just I want to read this paper, but I want to read this paper written for, a layperson, then you can actually do that a lot better than if it's I want to read this paper, but I want commentary about whether what they're describing is ethical.
Yeah, it should be possible to have something like a large language model for yourself that somehow knows the language you understand, the words and concepts or whatever that you understand, and can translate things in the way that it makes you understand them more, maybe.
Though you have to be very careful about anything where you get argumentative, because it's how dare you say that? Well, I didn't say that. The language model injected that. It was nice. So you do need to refer back to the actual thing if you want to be arguing rather than communicating. That's a weird distinction to make. But if the mode of communication you're doing is argumentative rather than information transmission, let's say, maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah. Is there a way that these models can color code, have some sort of color coding in their output that sort of highlights oh, hey, this is something that I injected versus, oh, this is verbatim what you said kind of thing.
Sure. Why not?
Wait. You mean they can be aware of the parts that they hallucinate from an answer? From an output?
No, I mean, everything they output is a hallucination. So what you do is you get the output and you search for identical text. And if the text is literally identical, then you say, then this is verbatim. You don't trust the model to determine it. You just actually use a computer. The old computer science, 1960s stuff.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what this question is about also. If you wanted to
Well, I think there was something. Was it like a brain-to-brain interface?
Yeah.
Brain chips. Oh yeah. I mean, because they have the same problem now. It's not going to be enough to have some high bandwidth channel directly to the brain of some other person. I think there probably has to be some kind of translation. Unless the two people that communicate, like if they have this channel for a long time, they might just learn and adapt to it existing, and so they might just, I don't know, become one person, maybe even, or something like this. Like they might figure out the communication by themselves. Yeah, if they haven't trained this for a long time, then you need some kind of intermediator or something, I think.
I've heard something similar on that stuff, but what I always think about is, I have no idea if it happens to you all as well, but when I'm thinking about something, I don't think faster than I can talk. Like, do I think too slow, or is that a thing for everyone?
I mean, I think it's more that you think by talking, or part of your process of thinking is talking.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who are like that, processing out loud with other people. Like, yeah.
Sometimes people can think better when they talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
For example, they come to discuss a problem. As they're explaining the problem, they find the solution and they go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I always wonder, like, for people who are like that, and that's the primary mode of, like, working out ideas, it sucks to only be by yourself and to, like, work by yourself. So, like, could there be an AI model to assist with that? Like, it's not like saying there's an app for that anymore. It's now there's an AI model for that now.
Like there are two agents inside the brain of a person. The agent for talking, the agent for thinking. Their collaboration solve the problem in a better way. Somehow they assist each other.
Yeah. But I think like that the problem with like having like a brain chip to a brain chip interface is like the same reason that fMRI data is really difficult to compare across individuals. Because like given the same input, or like even like the same like, oh, this patient has identified that they're feeling sad or whatever, and then that patient identifies that they're feeling sad, like their fMRI like data points or scans or whatever, like their brain states can look completely different. And that's what I've heard from a lot of people who study this kind of data, is like people's brain states for like one thing can be vastly different. So I think that Martin's right when like a brain chip interface, there needs to be some sort of like, there still needs to be translation between them. So our brains are different, I guess, the wide, even if it was like, okay, say I could talk to myself, like I clone myself, and then I have a brain chip to chat with my clone, that would be fine. But like 10 years in the future, one were to age 10 years and learn for 10 years, and then I have my other one, it would still be the same problem because even my own brain is changing constantly.
When you started the sentence, it reminded me of, I think it was Socrates' method, in which you would question systematically something to critically approach a question until you get to, it's not the truth, but let's assume it's the truth. But like when we were mentioning about these people, like it's better to think out loud. That would be very helpful to have a Socratic method AI or something like that I can talk to, and it will construct arguments to question what I am hypothesizing until we find a theory.
I mean, I'm sure people are already doing that with ChatGPT. Here's my argument. How would you counter this? How would you attack this? What's the weakness of this argument?
Yeah, but then you have like examples like Alisa, where it goes like, according to this paper.
Well, yeah. So none of these things are safe to use if you don't understand how they work. You can't rely on any of these, but if it says something and then you're like, oh, I didn't think about that, then okay, good, it helped. And if it's like, okay, this is some specific thing it can't possibly know, then it's like, okay, I'll bother to look into it, or I'll just assume it's making stuff up again.
If you just want feedback on an idea, you can probably get it. When you talk to another human, they also might get you down the wrong path.
Well, yeah, that's
having some language model that translates things to you personally, that would be good, I think. I mean, like, there's lots of papers that I think I could probably understand, especially that I could understand very quickly if they were just translated into like things that so basically they are like papers where I think I probably know all the technical concepts needed. I just know them maybe in another language or something, in another expression, another formalism. And then those papers I could maybe just understand like in 5 minutes if I had some translator.
In that sense, and remembering what Alisa posted about the GitHub, someone that did a GPT model that like kind of summarized the papers. In that sense, I have always thought, like, doesn't that actually reflect is a problem that we're having with like academic writing. That's what the summary is supposed to be making. But I also face that a lot of a paper that I'm like, wait, what? And then after you spend like 5 hours of reading the same sentence over again, I was like, oh, I get it. But why did they write it this way?
Part of the thing is, what is the purpose of the writing? It may not be to actually, or may not only be for you to understand, but also to make it defensible so that no one can say, you said this, but you were wrong. It's like, well, no, I said it might be this. I'm not wrong.
Okay. Like, I really like videos that explain things to me like I'm 5, or like I go on Reddit, like r explain like I'm 5 is like one of my favorite subreddits, because I don't want to spend like hours trying to pick apart some sort of like new jargon that I have to go 5 layers deep to look terms up. It's crazy. Yeah, exactly. Because I'm 5. Okay? Because I'm 5.
I think Nicholas is kind of right. The papers serve more purposes than trying to get the idea across as fast as possible. And so they are not necessarily very good at it. The thing is, like, if you actually just want to know what the person that wrote the paper figured out that's of interest to you, then definitely a large part of the paper isn't really written for you, because there's all this other stuff like related work sections and blah, blah, blah. And yeah.
Yeah, or like even it would be really cool to say, okay, bot, make a animation that explains this concept in this paper, or like turn this paper into an animation to explain the concepts.
I would just be happy for something that takes all those videos that people like to do now and actually just turns them into blog posts, because I'd much rather have the ability to random access things than have to actually watch through a video paced at the speaker's pace and, find where they're saying the important thing. Because usually there's like 2 sentences in the entire video that are the ones that I need. And then there's some, scanning through 5-10 minutes of content to get to the thing. I was finding this with like home improvement kind of videos. It's like, okay, like I don't need to know all of this stuff about, what does the insulation do and why you want good insulation and things like that. I want to know, like, what is the material I need to buy at the hardware store so I can get started on this, and what is the tool that I'm going to need. So yeah, turn videos into blog posts. That would be a good one.
Don't just turn it into a blog post, but fetch the relevant information for me.
Just ingest the whole video at once. And
yeah, but the problem is that depends on things that only I know, that I might not be able to communicate easily to it.
Well, no, but you just did. Like, if you have these, I have no idea what type of model will it be, that you say like, hey, I just have this specific isolation and I want to know, problem with my isolation, and I just want to know what I need. Then that thing watches the video and tells you, you just need, I don't know, Gorilla Glue or whatever.
Yeah, but that's still limited to its ability to understand me. And I'd rather depend on myself for that than, rely on it. Both my ability to communicate with it, which makes it limited, because I may not have a very specific idea. There is a twisty thing in the window. What is it? Like, is that going to be good enough? I don't know. But if I see a photo in the blog post that looks exactly like the thing in my window, I can be like, oh yeah, that.
You could give it a photo of this thing yourself, though, in this case. But I get the general point, but
the point of it isn't to make me not do any work. The point of it is to make it so that I can, as efficiently as possible, use my own brain to do the thing that I was going to use my own brain for. I'm not trying to replace my own cognition. I'm trying to make it so that I can engage my cognition more efficiently.
There are some things where your goal is actually to make your brain do the work itself. If I want to understand some concept in, I don't know, let's say, I want to understand the derivative, of course, I want as much help as possible to not have to work for anything else apart from understanding what the derivative is itself. So I want to have as much help as possible, but I want my brain to afterwards know how to do derivatives, I guess. Like, you want your brain to have this capability.
Yeah. It reminds me of like that scene in The Matrix where they're like, okay, Neo, it's time for training. And he's like, but we gotta go fight tomorrow. And they're like, don't worry, we have a simulation for that. And then they download it into a brain, right? And I always thought what would that process look like? If you were to we do that manually, or is it manually? I don't know. Well, we do it through a process, but can we make that process more efficient?
Let's say we learn a language, or if I can speak Chinese, and then if I would learn Chinese, I guess somehow some machine could reconfigure my whole neural network into the state where it it knows Chinese, but that seems pretty implausible.
No, it's not a new idea. I mean, it doesn't work by rewriting your brain, but the whole like learn languages while you sleep kind of thing is sort of an old meme or an old fad. You just have a tape playing with things in the language while you sleep. The idea being that you won't remember learning, but there will just be things that you are more likely to recognize as familiar. So you get over some of the barrier of like being able to make out syllables and sort of knowing what the language sounds like, knowing where the breaks are. You kind of, whether or not that works, it probably doesn't work very well. Certainly not compared to the fantasy of downloading a language into your head. But the idea that there are things you can learn without being aware you've learned them, there is prior art on that, I suppose. I mean, I think probably what you can do is you can make it so that you don't have to experience your brain doing the things. If for some reason you really hate learning and it's like the most awful thing, then you can probably offload a lot of that to subconscious processing that is still, quite real. It is your brain still doing things. The way that you tend to learn things is at first you're doing them consciously, and then as you get mastery, that is swapping over to unconscious processing. So it's like you're doing things by kind of dynamically running a search algorithm. I mean, you're not actually doing that, but it's sort of the structure of it, that you are trying things one at a time or actually thinking through things. And then it becomes more and more automatic as you kind of internalize the things you found or the things you figured out before, and you start to just do it via pattern recognition. And so if you had something that was kind of just like carrying you through the process, but while you were asleep, then you could probably make certain things feel automatic without ever having experienced learning them, and avoid having to subject yourself to the feeling of learning, which just sounds like a losing proposition anyway. But, some people, evidently there are some things like people are more willing to experience an electric shock than solve math problems. So,
Some people are really big into using lucid dreaming for building habits, or like I've heard people doing it for like dieting or, stopping addiction. Like, I don't really know about the science behind that, but I do wonder if the process of lucid dreaming could be used for certain kinds of learning and problem solving or something like that. Or does that just defeat the purpose of sleeping, because you're supposed to let your brain rest? And if your brain isn't resting while you're sleeping, are you really sleeping? I don't know.
I mean, I think you don't need it to be lucid dreaming. I think even just dreaming, you can learn things. I mean, that's dreaming, or one of the hypotheses about dreaming is that it's a sort of consolidation of experiences into longer term memory. So it is basically a learning process. There are algorithms that work via actually having a kind of dream cycle, where what they do is they learn certain things directly from data when awake by trying things, and then when they quote unquote dream, they have a stage where they will create intentional hallucinations of alternate versions of a task and try their policies in it, and essentially optimize their policies based on how they think the task would go, and then they cycle back and forth. It's actually, I think it's literally called dreamer. You don't actually have to be lucid for that.
Sad story that probably won't make it to the podcast. Every night I try to solve some exercise in a website called Lead Code. Well, I'm still learning how to code. I guess it's because that's literally one of the last things I do before I go to sleep. Sometimes I literally dream the solution of a problem I couldn't solve the night before. And then I wake up and I write it. And sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes I solve it on my sleep, if you would say it. I'm pretty sure it's still consciously, well, not because I'm asleep. But anyway. You get the point. I'm pretty sure there must be techniques to.
I think it's actually really good for music composition.
That we have experienced in our life, that we push our brain to do something, we do worse.
True, but kind of like overfitting or something, right?
Writing an article, which just write freely, it becomes very beautiful.
Everyone's Japanese is better when drunk, right?
Yeah, I can attest to that.
That's it for this week's episode of the Cross Labs podcast On My Mind. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll be the first to know when the next episode is out. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.